You are listening to the US of NA by Nation Beer, a series of stories about the people and places from every corner of the country who are helping fuel the NA beer movement. If you like this episode, please add us to your library in Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you prefer to listen. For more great NA stories, including our many beer reviews, visit nationbeer.com. Are you a non-alcoholic beverage brand looking for help with growth? Then go to nation.beer to learn more about our digital marketing services.
You know, I look at this as, there's people I'm talking to, we're in Whole Foods in New York City, so I'm doing a lot of sampling there. There's people who, they're still drinking, but rather than a soda, or, people say, well, why would I want to drink a non-alcoholic beer? And I'm like, well, what do you drink when you're done drinking? And they're like, water. And I'm like, listen, 20 different ways. I'm going to help you keep the party going.
Keep the party going, indeed. It's a great line. It can apply to just about any situation with a non-alcoholic beer, whether it's someone who doesn't drink alcohol but still enjoys an adult beverage, maybe someone looking for an NA to close out a night of drinking but still have a beer in their hand, or someone who wants to relax and unwind after a long day at work with a drink but without the negatives of a daily beer. So with that in mind, we are here today with Jonathan Zimmerman, aka Johnny Atmosphere. We'll get to that in a little bit. Jonathan's the co-founder of Atmosphere Brewery in Brooklyn, New York, who you just heard doing his thing at the Zero Co., an alcohol-free bottle shop in Atlanta. Jonathan's a friend of ours and someone we consider to be bringing not only some really good beer to the NA category, but also some new energy, new creativity to help continue that non-alcoholic party going as well. So we'd like to welcome Jonathan to the first episode of the podcast. And hey, first things first, let's crack open a can of some Atmosphere Pills.
Oh, yeah, I'm going right here, man. Let's go for it. Ready? 3,
right, ready?
2, 1.
The most
There we go.
satisfying noise in beer, NA or otherwise, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Excellent.
The sound of the can opening, and it's like when a cork pops in a bottle of champagne. It's like the party has begun. And I think the same thing when you're cracking open that first beer. It's like, all right, now it's time to celebrate,
That's right. The excitement.
Or relax. I think there's both sides of that. One is and you've got the hops oil that's sort of like firing off the GABA transmitters to relax you, or the other way around. It's, hitting the serotonin and getting you going. So
that's right. The excitement, the anticipation.
Yeah. And you got that sound
sip.
sort of like the Pavlovian bell. You're right.
That's right. And it transcends alcohol, no alcohol. It sounds just as satisfying. So
exactly.
Very good. All right. Well, let's get into it. And, obviously I know we want to talk a little bit about Johnny Atmosphere, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But I thought as a starting point here, if you want to give us a little bit of background on the brewery and what made you get into NA beer, and we'll kick things off from there.
So Atmosphere Brewery is really, we're a beer brand, alcohol-free beer brand at that. And the vision is to create just alcohol-free beers and market those. And so we're actually working with a 400-year-old German brewing partner right now to actually create our beer. I'd gone over there and worked with them to sort of develop this flavor profile. But, I sort of fell into this, and it was really, 2019. I sit down and I play guitar every night, and that's really how I unwind. And I used to have a beer at night when I was playing, but I found that it really had begun to disrupt my sleep. Right. And that, there was a period of time where I was suffering from some depression, and I'd cut out all alcohol, all cannabis. I'd actually gone vegan for a long time, completely vegan, really flushed out my body. So when I went back to all right, I'll have a can of beer, it was really affecting me, my sleep pattern. I'd be waking up in the middle of the night, it's a diuretic. And then, the next day would be kind of wrecked because my brain had turned on at that point and I was losing a lot of sleep. And, a friend turned me on to actually Athletic at that time, and which, they were sort of brand new. And I was like, this is super exciting. This is exactly what I wanted. I wanted really a great tasting craft beer, but I didn't want the ethanol, or the alcohol in it. And what wasn't being made at the time was a good Pilsner. And that sort of was the impetus to really create Atmosphere Brewery. I think also I've got to this point where I'm really having a good time on the party train, but I just couldn't hang out in the bar car anymore. I've kind of needed to move to the lounge car
Yep.
and, keep the good conversation going. But the alcohol, by and large, just it's not working for me. Though I really love a great beer, I love a great glass of wine, I love a great scotch, but just the ethanol is not, it's not happening. So I've had to
Yeah.
sort of find some replacements or seriously moderate. If someone were to say to me, look, here's a great scotch, I'm like, all right, pour me a half a finger and I'll get through half of that and be like, all right, this does taste great. I'll put that into my memory and push the glass aside. So yeah, that's sort of where where the impetus of this was. And I really wanted to create a alcohol-free beer brand. So I was sort of searching around the U.S. at that time, and really, other than the large brands, Coors, Budweiser, no one was really making that much non-alc, and no one was really using the equipment to get the 0.0 beer other than the big guys. So they were never going to talk to me. So at the recommendation of a friend, I ended up going over to Germany and met an acquaintance there, and we ended up crisscrossing Bavaria. This is just before the pandemic. We put together an RFP and sent it out to, I don't know, several hundred breweries in Germany, and several came back. And, one of them was sort of lining up to purchase some brand new de-alc equipment, and they were very excited to talk. And I sent them over some really great hop-forward American Pilsners, and I was sort of like, look, this is kind of the direction that I want to go in. And, what we have today as Atmosphere Pils is really the result of those discussions and collaboration.
Yeah. So the Pilsner was sort of always the plan, and then it sounds like you ended up trying to find somebody in Germany or trying to find a brewery in Germany. Was that the original thought? Was that it would be a beer actually brewed in Germany and you'd bring it over to here, or was that something that you were sort of open to and that just happened to be an opportunity and the best way to make a great NA beer?
I think it was really more about the opportunity, to be honest with you. I mean, I think at that point in time, it could have been anywhere. As I became as I did more and more research into beer history and beer brewing and the heritage of it, I became more and more attracted also to, European brewing methods, and in particular Germany and the Reinheitsgebot, this sort of German beer purity law that they have, and sort of this focus on using hops, barley, and water, which also gave me sort of at the same time a real appreciation for the American craft beer scene that emerged over the past, 30 years, and where they've taken beer into very, very different directions from sort of these traditional European methods. But what I really wanted was just a great tasting pils that I could have any time. It worked well with food and a hot day or whenever, like right now, As I sort of began to do some research with friends and family of what kind of beer they liked, sort of the consistent theme was sort of that light lager pils style. And as I began to think of like, okay, if I'm going to market a product for other people other than myself, what's kind of open in that, what's missing in this product category, as there was sort of getting to be some other non-alcoholic beers at the time.
Right.
And, just sort of settled, like from the marketing portion of me then stepped in and said, okay, this is actually this style of beer is really the most widely drunk beer in the world. Let me focus on this one for a first style. And, I don't have a background in the beverage industry, so every day is a learning. And I decided I wanted to start with the pils because it was going to be an uphill battle to really learn how to make this into a great product and get it out into the marketplace. And that, let's just do one thing and let's do it really well. And once we've got this sort of figured out, we can look at some other styles. So I think one of the things that I learned when I went over to Germany was really how many breweries make non-alcoholic beer there. And the brewmasters' approaches to this in the breweries is, this is just another type of beer. And they apply the same effort to making a really good non-alcoholic beer as their regular alcoholic beers. And what I also began to understand is that there's just a different approach to consuming alcohol in Germany and personal safety. For instance, if you get popped for a DUI there, my understanding is they take your license away for 6 months and send you to a psychologist with the idea that if you're drinking and driving, you must be crazy, right? Like the idea that you would actually, right, get in a car after being drinking and potentially hurt other people in your car or other people outside the car, your other fellow citizens. There must be something wrong with you, which I found to be very sensible. There's like a very sensible approach to this, and it's inclusive of there are other people around who may not be able to drink alcohol for multiple different reasons, you know? And the sort of German approach of this is a family thing and all our friends need to come to the table and let's all enjoy this together, you know?
Well, so let's talk about, you sort of referenced there that there obviously are many different reasons that people might pursue a non-alcoholic beer, drink non-alc. And let's bring in the character of Johnny Atmosphere into this, since I think Johnny plays a role just in kind of breaking down those barriers between, each of those different groups. I guess first off, let's paint a picture for everybody of who Johnny Atmosphere is. I guess spoiler alert, it's typically been you, or though maybe that's not the entire future of the brand. Maybe it could be some other folks as well. But
absolutely,
let's paint a picture of who Johnny is, what he looks like, sort of what role he plays.
Sure. So I've created this sort of avatar for myself of when I'm going out and doing samplings and talking to people about atmosphere and inevitably, non-alcoholic beer and non-alcoholic drinks. And, I used to be in rock and roll bands. So this is bringing a little bit of that sort of, David Lee Roth to the table and having a good time. I always think of the band Chic and, some of those great tracks when I'm playing this character. And I think I'm actually an artist, so I can be very sort of quiet, more observational of a scene. And I have this silver sequined tuxedo jacket or sport coat that I put on. And it just sort of allows me to sort of bring out my inner adolescent or whatever and become more gregarious and want to interact with people. And sort of have this, fuck it attitude. I think in a way, like if you're drinking alcohol, quite often you sort of get to that point where you're like, I'm going to act out my feeling, good, bad, or indifferent. And for this, I put this jacket on and it allows me to sort of bring this persona out that's much more gregarious and trying to emote having a good time without the alcohol, at least me personally. And showing people that you can have a good time and sort of be outgoing without needing to rely on alcohol to do that, like a lot of people do. They sort of use it as a social crutch to sort of break down their inhibitions of talking to other people, introducing themselves to other people, right?
Right.
And what I've found as I've gone out and talked, to people in this way is that people are curious about who I am and what I'm doing. And I've over the past year, I've done many, many sampling events, and I've probably given out 3,500 individual samples to people. One of the things that happens when people walk by me is I get people walking up and they're like, oh, wow, I really like that jacket. And then they start to walk away and I'm sort of like chase after them. I'm not actually chasing them, but I'm like, hey, I have something else you may like too, And at that point they turn around, they come back and they're kind of intrigued. And this is all sort of this, Johnny atmosphere of reaching out to people and engaging with them. Sometimes there'll be like someone's walking by with the stroller and there's this crying kid. And I look at the kid, I'm like, I know how you're feeling. Like life can be really disappointing, can it? And the kid looks at me because I'm like shiny and then they sort of begin to smile. And then I look at the dad or the mom and I'm like, I know how you're feeling too, right? I got something for you. And inevitably they sort of, move the stroller over and check it out, or there's these sort of stupid dad jokes I do, like, what did the zeros say to the 8? And there's a pause and I'm like, nice belt. And you can sort of see their brain tick over, right? And that leads into, hey, every can of Atmosphere has only 45 calories, so you don't need to watch your belt.
Who knew that Johnny was such a hit with the young parents?
Right?
It's a demographic I wouldn't have thought of. Fantastic.
Yeah, I have a great time doing it.
So moving away from Johnny for a moment, and we may come back to him later. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences with sampling? I know you mentioned you've done, I think you mentioned 3,500 samples you've given away, which is a lot of NA beer, by the way. When you're out there in the wild, who exactly is approaching you, would you say?
What I'm finding myself is I'm now doing sampling in really sort of three different situations, and that's the first is non-alc bottle shops like Zero Co in Atlanta, Minus Moonshine in New York, or Dre Drinks in Boston. That's one space. The other then is Whole Foods, and primarily in New York, but we're also in New York, we're also in Whole Foods in Boston and Atlanta. And then the third is actually at um, alcohol stores that have beer and wine. I'm not doing this primarily in New York, but Boston, Atlanta, where I can go do that. It's a very different conversation, right? And I think to start out in the non-alc bottle shops is primarily people coming in who already are interested in or are already drinking non-alcoholic beverages for whatever reason. And for there, it's really sort of a conversation about the brand and sort of creating a different no pun intended, a different atmosphere of a brand. Like, hey, you're actually talking to the owner, this is the guy, and I'm here to have a good time, and to help reinforce what I think the stores are already sort of working with is, yeah, they're non-alcoholic adult beverages, let's have a good time. And what I find is that there's a lot of people coming in who are using cannabis too, and part of the conversation is reinforcing their decision to drink non-alcoholic beer and continue that party. Like I always like to say, look, I've got 35 years of cognitive behavioral programming with alcohol. I don't need the alcohol now to have a good time, or I mean, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, you have something that's similar, a simulacrum of a alcoholic beverage, and you kind of know where to go with that. And you're trying to put yourself, or I'm trying to put myself in situations where that are celebratory, right? And going into it with that attitude, or sensual for that matter, if you're with your partner. Um, and I think then, I step into Whole Foods, and, the Johnny atmosphere, the whole outfit really begins to attract people from across the grocery store to me. People are coming up going, whatever you're on, I want some of that too. Whatever you're selling, tell me, and they're excited to like be there. And I think, what I've noticed are the people working at Whole Foods too, which are really wonderful people. I really like the staff at Whole Foods. They're a lot of fun to work with. They're very open and accepting of me coming in and doing this. And I think they see it as sort of, I'm providing a little theater to, the grocery shoppers, the shoppers at Whole Foods, and everyone's having a great time with it. And, what I'm finding there, there's a group of people who are already familiar with non-alc beverages, and they're now going to Whole Foods to look for other brands. And, they may be shopping at a Minus Moonshine or a Zero Co or whatever, but they're also going to now Whole Foods to buy non-alc beer because there's a good selection there. And, they're interested to go meet the founder. I have other people, there's a lot of people who I've met who have no idea that there's any good non-alcoholic products out there. They're just not even aware of the category, and they're being exposed to it through me. They're not shopping in the beer area, or they're not even shopping in the non-alcoholic beer area at Whole Foods. They're like, oh, is this like O'Doul's? And I'm like, no, hold on. We're at a whole nother level here, right? And this is where Johnny Atmosphere is there to introduce it, because they're just thinking non-alcoholic beers, O'Doul Sharps, and like whatever, This is not your grandfather's, part of the Johnny Atmosphere thing is this is not your grandfather's non-alc, and I'm here to have a good time, right? And let me impose that good time on you, right? The third place that I find myself is in beer and liquor stores, and here in New York, I can do that in beer stores, and I go do that in like specialty craft beer stores. And then Boston, I'm at beer, wine, liquor stores. And the conversation is a little different there in that I'm running into people who are there to buy alcohol and either may drink non-alc or they haven't really been exposed to it yet. And it's a really fascinating conversation to have with them, to say, look, I'm not trying to take your beer away from you. I'm trying to give you more beer. And, the conversation that I have with a lot of them, that like, I always get this like, well, give me a good reason why I want to drink non-alcoholic beer. Right. And my answer always at that point is like, look, I'm not trying to take anything away from you. Actually, non-alcoholic beer, you know, or I'll start with saying like, look, alcoholic beer, alcohol in general is a diuretic, and takes them a half a second and they acknowledge that. And then I continue with, non-alcoholic beer is actually a great isotonic. The properties of the barley and the hops actually make it a great isotonic and help you rehydrate faster. And at that point, I watch the gears turning over. And I'm like, you know what? If you finish the night on a non-alcoholic beer, you're going to be better hydrated and you may sleep better and you may wake up feeling a little better. And the light bulb sort of goes off at that point. And then, quite often I'll start talking about this research of they're finding that, the hops actually has a property of triggering, the GABA neurons, which lead to better sleep, right? So there's some science behind this too. And what I'm finding is at that point in the sort of the conversation, some people are actually oh, you know what? That's actually really cool. Let me take a 4-pack, or, I'm not here to buy that right now, but that's actually a great reason why I should, And what I'm finding is it's really just about meeting people where they're at. There's people who are sober, looking for other things. There's other people who are all over the spectrum. And then there's people who've never even considered non-alc in the context of drinking alcohol, right? Like I'll talk to these young dudes and I'll be like, look, go ahead and drink your regular beer, but throw a non-alc in during that drinking session. And you're going to be able to party all night long like a rock star and get up and go back to work and feel all right. And that there's that whole dialogue to have.
I love that mindset that you have, and obviously trying to meet people where they are and trying to appeal to them based on whatever it is they're looking to get out of the category, which is obviously going to be different from somebody who's walking around a liquor store intending to buy themselves some alcohol and may encounter you at a sampling versus somebody who might be at a minus moonshine in New York or a Zero Co or Soberish here in Atlanta, where they've already walked into a store intending to buy non-alcoholic beverages. So you have to meet people where they are. It's not a one size fits all category, and people might be in it for different reasons. And I think certainly to your point, being able to speak to that and be able to connect with people in each of those areas and be able to meet them where they are is certainly very important. So you talked earlier about NA in Germany and really their drinking culture overall, which I think, is really spread to the rest of Europe also in terms of how they view people who drink too much and what is considered drinking too much, et cetera. Do you think that type of mindset will eventually make it here to the US?
You know what? I think in the United States, there is a different approach here, which what I'm noticing, and I think this is primarily a Gen Z thing and perhaps millennial, which is more of a you do you kind of approach, as the normalization of cannabis is out there. And then on the West Coast, you have, or in some communities, more use of magic mushrooms and stuff like this. And there's more an openness and acceptance of maybe different people want to choose a different thing to get high on or drunk on or whatever, that, you do you, whatever. Or if you're sober, whatever, let's just all hang out and have a good time. I find that there's more openness to that, right? Or growing openness to that. And it may be back to this sort of American individualism and you do you as an individual and being accepting of that then allows us to, as a culture, have more of this non-alc options available, right? I think also there's the health and wellness, which is dragging some of this along too. And as I go out, this is where I keep having these conversations about it's not a binary of not drinking or drinking alcohol. It's a discussion of moderation and, interspersing your alcoholic beverages with a non-alcoholic beverage, which seems to resonate with a lot of people, and sort of stretching things out, It's the individualism and the choice of what you want to do with your life. I think that's kind of the American, that's the kernel of the Constitution and our way of thinking about me and then the community and how do we all fit together with our individualism. As far as where this trend goes in America, what I do know is that athletic brewing is the largest beer brand by volume at Whole Foods in the United States nationally. That's an indicator of where things are going and the success that they're having, right, in Whole Foods and other places is fantastic. And they're really opening up the category in a lot of places where there's good non-alcoholic wine out there. It's not like the one brand that is a go-to hasn't gotten everywhere yet, or there's not enough brands everywhere that are on the menu or in the restaurant, the hotel, or the grocery store yet. At this point, Athletic has cracked that, and they're like everywhere now, right? They're going to drag a lot of people into the space just because they make a great product, they make great beer, they make a bunch of great styles, and they're in everywhere now.
Listen, Jonathan, this has been great. Really appreciate you taking the time with us today. Knew you'd have a great perspective, not just on what Atmosphere is trying to do, but obviously what's happening in the overall category, which is exciting times for everybody, obviously. So thank you so much for being with us today and being our first guest on USFNA. And when are we going to see you next in Georgia?
John, thank you so much for inviting me. This has been a lot of fun. I'm having a great time. It's been fun to share ideas and go back and forth with you. I'll be back in Atlanta next week at Zero Co. And I'll see you then. All right.